Hi, and welcome to Seat to the Street, conversations from the Diocese of Carlisle. I'm Rob Humphreys, and I'm the Digital Support Enabler. In the next 20 minutes, we're going to explore how the Bishop's enthronement connects with everyday life across Cumbria and across our international partnerships. Today, I'm joined by Eleanor Hancock. Thank you very much for being here, Eleanor. Let's get started.
Okay.
Just start by telling us a little bit about who you are, where you live, what you do now.
Okay. Well, Eleanor Hancock. I'm a retired priest, a former priest in charge of Holy Trinity in St Barnabas in Carlisle. I was there for 12 years as curate and then as priest in charge. And I actually live probably, 500 yards from the vicarage that we used to live in, all to do with a grand piano and room. But anyway, the bishop agreed it at the time. So I'm a Carlisle girl, and I'm still delighted to be serving in the church in a retired capacity now.
Brilliant. So how does a Carlisle girl then get into ministry? How did you first find that vocation?
Well, that's an interesting one, really, because I wasn't brought up in a Christian family. Although they would say they had Christian values. I'm not knocking any of that, but certainly as a churchgoer as a starter. But then I started kind of sneaking out to Sunday school and church before I was a teenager, and then become much more engaged again. I was in the Air Force for a while, so I joined the Soldiers, Sailors and Air Force Religious Association. That's a mouthful, and was on and off engaged in the local church during the time when my daughter was quite young. So I had some association. I had a grandmother who was a staunch Scottish Presbyterian, and occasionally we did things with her, my cousin and I, when we were younger, but not a lot of influence, but enough to start the ball rolling. I would say I came to faith in the very early 90s. I had a bit of an interest in life before then. Lots of different jobs, well, good jobs and things, but I also was a victim of domestic abuse, which is one of the things that I still am very passionate about, and I've been able to share that. But that took me to a church where, as a kind of pretty vulnerable woman at the time, I received such love and care, although they may not have realised what was going on at the time, and that started a very, very intimate relationship with members of the church, but also with Jesus. So I feel as if I met him for the first time. I was actually received into membership of the Methodist Church when I was 17 in my Air Force uniform. But really, I think the relationship started then, and hasn't gone away.
That's great. Now you've been a curate with Bishop Rob.
Yeah.
Do you want to just say how that was, going back all that time when you were both starting out your ministry together?
Well, that's right. We were both ordained the same year. We didn't train together, but we're ordained in the same year. And so we went through all our kind of curacy training. It's when the world kind of changes, and you realise that what you've been learning about and putting it into practice are maybe not two completely different things, but and we had different experiences of being curates at the same time as well. And then we were also first incumbents together, if you like, in different parts of the county, but we went through the first incumbency kind of time and training and stuff with the diocese as well. And our paths just crossed a lot. The crossed from start, all the time. So we developed a friendship, which is really special. So I was delighted when he came back as Bishop of Penrith.
Right. And you touched on there about your experience with domestic abuse and how you're passionate about that. Do you want to just tell us a little bit about what you
Yeah,
do with that now?
I can do. I mean, things have changed over time in terms of my involvement with things like Churches Together, where I used to lead a group of churches together that was raising awareness of domestic abuse right across the county. Rob's been on one of those training courses many years ago. We trained a lot of priests and curates and pastoral workers right across the denominations for quite a long time. And I'm still an advocate for particularly for victims of domestic and sexual abuse. In fact, I chair a charity based in Carlisle called Safety Net, and we provide the kind of therapy, post-traumatic therapy for people that have gone through the crisis in whatever way that was, but are helping them with coming to terms with life after that. And some of it is, of course, historical stuff, even church abuse and so on, is the people that come to us, men, women, and children for therapy. So that's something that I'm still very passionate about. In fact, when I went to see the bishop to say I was retiring, that was one of the things I said. I want to concentrate more on helping raise awareness and provide support for victims. We call them people with lived experience now. So I never was a victim. I always felt I was a survivor. But I think God's used that experience quite powerfully for others. Yeah, so it's been a privilege, and it still is.
You're also director of Cumbria Cathedral. Just want to tell us a little bit about that and how that works?
Yeah, Cumbria is a movement, and it's of the Anglican Church, with a particular emphasis on renewal, and we have been active in Cumbria since 1993. And actually, I was on the very first course. It kind of grows from a course. People are invited or are encouraged to attend a course, encouraging leadership and vocation not necessarily ordained or anything like that, just people understanding what the gifts that God has given them, and how they might have the confidence to exercise those in the church and the community. And it been very fundamental in my life. Many of us, that's how I met Bishop Roberts DDO. Often people coming through Cumbria Cathedral, through Cathedral internationally, may sense a call to some kind of vocation, and through us and through other parts of the diocese, we can help them explore that. So that's really quite important to me, and as I say, that's what led me
And
to ordination.
yeah, and for anybody watching this now, how can they access Cumbria Cathedral? How might they go about exploring that?
There are members of Cathedral all over the diocese, so that's first, north, south, east, and west, and it's often a word of mouth kind of thing. More, some local ministers know more about it than others, which is fine. There was a bishop of Glasgow once called Cassio the best kept secret of the Anglican Church. It's not meant to be secret. It's just there's not massive numbers of courses and so on. And we have a website, Cumbria Cathedral. You'll find that on the website with some basic details of the organisation and what we're about. But I've got a phone number and an email, and I'm happy to speak to anybody about that. I think it's been really, it's a really empowering thing in terms of, I've never experienced the love of God quite like it as on a Cathedral weekend.
You spent 12 years leading St Barnabas and Holy Trinity in Carlisle.
Yeah.
What of those, and you've obviously grown up in Cumbria, what have those communities taught you about the people of Cumbria?
Well, I'm from Carlisle. I was born and bred. I was brought up on a housing estate in the south of the city, and went to the then high school in the middle of town. So I met people from all over the town. Then disappeared for a while and came back. And I love the city. That's number one. But I think the great privilege of serving Holy Trinity in St Barnabas, and we also had a worship centre at Sansfield Park where we now live, because we met people from all walks of life, and who have all sorts of different skills and abilities and things to offer and needs. And one of the things about being in a fairly big, well, biggest I think in the county, urban parish, is occasional offices and meeting people for funerals and baptisms and so on. So I just love folk, and folk need to be loved, and how better to know you're loved than to know God. And so that's an ongoing challenge to keep that message going. But that, I suppose, really, I didn't realise I had such a pastoral heart, I have to say. I don't know whether my former colleagues, when I was an HR manager, would think that. I hope so. But I think that real pastoral heart, which of course leads us later into the bishop's enthronement. But But yeah, I just love folks. We're northern, we're ordinary generally, um, and very resilient. I think that's one of the words that comes up time and time again. Even when, in the early days working with that's never not well, yes, working with young mums roundabout as we formed, stuff in the community and so on, and then helping to serve alongside others. A lot of young mums who are very resilient, not a lot of money. There's a lot of child poverty in the neck of the woods where we served. And it, a lot of need, but also a lot of humour and resilience. Yeah. And it's some of the ministry
Great.
that started all those years ago, fortunately, is still going on. So I'm very happy about that.
Yeah, that's great. Um, you've mentioned there that you were a HR manager.
Mm.
How do you how's that helped you build your ministry as a church leader?
Well, I had a fairly senior job eventually. So understanding organizations, I did a lot of organizational development in two of my roles before I was ordained. And so understanding how organizations work, and I know we're not an organization, and I know we don't lead them like managers, and we shouldn't even attempt to do that. But having said that, knowing how people interact with each other, what might work in certain circumstances, understanding a bit about finances, sadly. I used to be a statistician as well in the Air Force, so understanding the figures has come in handy now and again. But the most important thing about all of that is relationship. And relationship is about whether it's HR, whether it's leadership, whether it's getting alongside people in a community gathering or a food bank or whatever, and and speaking to people about love and about Jesus. It's about relationship, because if you don't have a relationship with folk, how can you build trust and how can you develop from there? So that's what it's about.
You've obviously known Bishop Rob for many years. Um, in the anointing part of the enthronement service, you're going to be presenting him with the pastoral staff. Um, what does that mean to you to do that and to
I'm going to
be
try not to
involved at that
cry
point?
because it's such a privilege, isn't it? I mean, well, he's still young, isn't he? But I'm quite a bit older than Rob, and to me, seeing him as a young man and how he's always been with people and with his colleagues and with others, and uh, seeing him, grow with the roles he had in the diocese, and then he disappeared and came back, and to greet him as a long lost friend when he came back as Bishop of Penrith. He came to see my husband because he'd had a heart attack. I mean, it's just the kind of guy he is. Him and Emma, well, actually, Emma couldn't come, but they've been to lunch with, I'd like to think we're friends, but overarching, he's got such a heart for people, a heart for Jesus, a heart for people, and he understands. I believe he really understands the need for us to care for each other, to care for the folk around us and to care for each other. And one of my big things is, and he knows this, is caring for the lay folk that actually really do. They're the ones that lead our churches. They're the ones that make our churches tick and happen and sort stuff out. So as I suppose, as spiritual director of Cumbria, which is a lay-led organisation, it just does seem to come together. But an absolute privilege, and to hand on that pastoral staff, um, and to acknowledge him as our shepherd is mega, and I know that he's up to the job because God put him.
Quite a significant moment, isn't it? Because
Yeah,
it's a
it is.
that that
Yeah,
that pastoral staff is
yeah,
is a huge
mm,
symbol, and
yeah. What a
yeah,
privilege.
no, that's good.
A privilege for him and a
Mhm,
privilege for me.
mhm. What will you be praying for him as he starts as he continues his
As he
ministry?
continues his ministry. Well, I ask him about prayer, not all the time, but relatively when I get the chance. And it was only last week I was asking him again, and what he's asked me to pray for and us to pray for is wisdom, daily wisdom, as he makes decisions, as he walks with Jesus into the future, but also being at the top of an organization, because he is. It can be a lonely place. It can be a very exposed place, and sometimes you can be kind of under attack, or and people's expectations and all of those kind of things. So I think protection, wisdom, and just thanksgiving, holding him before God with thanksgiving, because he's such a faithful person for us to have at our helm. So there you go. I just love him.
And 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 Bishop Rob's asked, people of Carlisle Diocese to raise the spiritual
Yeah.
tempo to become more in prayer. How do you think we go about raising that spiritual tempo, and how do you see us moving forward in the future with the Diocese of Carlisle?
Prayer's the key, isn't it? One of the first things he said to me when he came back to Carlisle was, "How's Kisio going?" Because we know if we've got prayer requests, we can do that. It's a very prayerful. We have a rule of life based on prayer, and so prayer is the thing really, and it's about encouraging and enabling people to have a closer walk with Christ, and to do that through prayer and through individual and corporate worship. So our worship is really good, um, making sure that we've got places where people can worship in whatever their tradition is. I think that's important. There's more than one way of getting together in worship, and he really gets that, I believe. Um, so yeah, just enabling people to walk with Jesus, to talk and to pray and to feel part of something far bigger than themselves, and to have trust that our prayers actually do make a difference.
So you said earlier before that you're a Carlisle girl, and just interested, how do we connect faith and the church with people in Carlisle, in those estates in Carlisle? How do we go about doing that?
Well, we get in amongst it for starters. So we do need worshipping communities in every community in the city. I think that's absolutely paramount. And it's not about, come and see us, aren't we great? We've got a church with a steeple. It's about, let's get in amongst you and see what the community needs. And I believe that, there are really good churches in town that do that very much. Um, but also, I mean, I don't do it so much now because I ain't a vicar really anymore. But I used to sit with the head of the council. I regularly sat with the head of the city council, and we chewed the fat. And so interacting with people in positions that are, that can make decisions or know what the temperature is and that kind of stuff. So I actually think getting in amongst politicians, civil, local government officers, the police, fire, NHS, all of that kind of thing. I really think it makes a difference, because what we want to do is to bring light into the lives of others, and to know how best we might serve our communities, as well as loving them and trying to draw them into fellowship. Um, but first and foremost, I think it's about loving and caring, knowing our communities, and responding appropriately. I think the first thing is to pray, to understand what's going on in our communities, but to be praying. I remember walking years and years ago, walking down Botchergate, which is a street in Carlisle, with a leader of another one of the free churches in town. We used to meet a lot. Some church leaders still meet a lot together, and we just walked the streets and prayed, and we I think one of the things that folk that I talk to might not feel good enough to be in church, or good enough to pray. Our job is to tell them they are good enough. We're all good enough. None of us are good enough in one way, but really, offers of prayer are always genuinely really accepted and welcomed. I learned that as a hospital chaplain as well. That prayer is just, folk that don't think they can do it themselves don't realise that we so praying for individuals, requests for individuals that for your communities, your neighbourhoods. I think our job more than anything else is just to get out there and to pray for the people around us.
Right. How can people pray for you now in your ministry, and what you're doing now in
Well,
retirement?
that would be kind. I think for me, I haven't really stopped, and it's not about balance. I don't mean that at all, but I try always to be discerning about where the greatest need is for me, to go and help out. I'm just moving into another group of parishes just to give them a bit of a helping hand while there's a vacancy. So I'm a vacancy filler more than anything else. But yeah, and for, you know, for sustained health and energy, I think that's it really. Thank you.
Eleanor, thank you very much for sharing your insights into Bishop Rob, for exploring your history, your ministry, all that you've been through. It's been really, really insightful. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Take care.
Thank you for listening to Seat to Street. If this conversation has helped, please follow the Diocese of Carlisle and the Carlisle Cathedral on the website and on the social media channels, and share an episode with a friend. As we look forward to the Bishop's enthronement at Carlisle Cathedral on Saturday the 29th of November at 2 p.m, please keep our churches, schools, communities and youth workers in your prayers. See you next time.